What's up, Reach Church? Good morning. Good morning. All right, great to see you. My name's Cullen. I'm the lead pastor, and glad that you chose to worship with us today. And I'd love to meet you if you're a guest with us and I haven't got a chance to do that. Be sure to stop by the Welcome Center. And it's good to be back from vacation. We've been gone a couple weeks, had some amazing times together. And I got to pause and I just got to reiterate the celebration of what God is doing. I mean, you gave over $80,000 to Venture, one of our key global impact partners, to rescue vulnerable girls from human trafficking. Reach Church, wow, there's so many things to celebrate. There's so many things to celebrate. This is one of them. Way to go. Thank you for your incredible generosity. And then I think about the team that we just sent to El Salvador, students and leaders, and they just got back and the impact that they made. And then we're sending another team to Africa in September. Then we're sending another team to Mexico in December. And I just love that we're a missions-oriented church. Like we care about not only our city, but we care about the world. So thank you, Reach Church. And there's so many things to celebrate. Would you agree? Like so much. Can we celebrate today? Come on, let's celebrate. Thank you. Thank God for what is happening. It's amazing. It really is. All right. Hey, so I just got to ask here, does anybody like watching the annual hot dog eating competition on July 4th every year? Is anybody okay, how many of you actually knew there was a hot dog eating competition on July 4th, all right, every year? Well, kind of fun thing for us in our home. I don't know, it just kind of became a family tradition. A number of years ago, we just started doing this, and so every year we're like, we got to watch a hot dog eating contest. It's a family tradition for us. It's really interesting and pretty gross all at the same time. And contestants, they see how many hot dogs they can eat in 10 minutes. We'll put a picture up there on the screen. Again, it is gross, just to kind of warn you. There's stuff in their face. There's like food all over the place. There's particles flying here and flying there. There's even a splash zone, like in the audience. And it's a messy deal. It just really is. And the star of the event is Joey Chestnut. He's the guy that you see there on the screen. He's actually a professional competitive eater. Okay, there is such a thing. How many of you would say, I want to do that? Yeah, it's an actual thing. There's even an organization called Major League Eating. It's a thing, Major League Eating. And Joey has actually won the annual hot dog eating competition a record 16 times. Okay, it's his claim to fame. And so it was actually big news on July 4th, 2024, so a year ago, when Major League Eating, the organization, they ruled that Joey could not participate in the hot dog eating competition that he had dominated so many times, okay? They wouldn't let him participate. This is a real thing. Because he had partnered with a rival brand called Impossible Foods, and they produce vegan products. And so, obviously, the hot dogs he's eating are not vegan. So, Major League Eating ruled that because of this vegan partnership, he couldn't participate in the beef hot dog eating competition last July 4th in 2024. And there were a lot of people that felt like this was an overreaction. They said they're overreacting to this thing. Like, why can't he eat whatever he wants to eat, okay? Like, this is a crazy overreaction. And it greatly reduced the hot dog eating competition viewership. It plummeted in 2024. It did. Okay, so they worked to resolve things this year on this July 4th, 2025, so that Joey could actually participate once again. And viewership went up, Joey's big comeback, and he won by eating 70 and a half hot dogs in 10 minutes. Over 70 hot dogs. I don't know if we should clap for that, or I don't know what we should do with that, but that's more hot dogs, I think, than I've eaten in my entire life. Now, it really seems that if there wasn't this initial overreaction in 2024 about the type of foods that Joey was eating, then they would have never had this issue in the first place, okay? It wouldn't have had this big issue, but it was this overreaction that caused it, all right? We can take that gross picture off the screens now. But, overreactions, they come in all shapes, all forms, and all sizes. When you think about it, we can overreact really easily in life. We can overreact about the tone that somebody uses when they talk to us. Like, I can't believe they're talking, just like an overreaction, like it happens, right? On the spot. We can overreact about somebody pulling in front of us when we're driving down the road. How many of you did that when you were coming to church today? You don't have to raise your hand. Appreciate that honesty. We can overreact when we get poor service at a restaurant, right? We can act like it's the end of the day. We can overreact when somebody sends us a text message that we don't like. We can overreact to social media comments that aren't even directed towards us, right? Unfortunately, I think overreactions have become a normal part of our culture. I'm not sure that's a good thing. And I just asked the question, does it really have to be that way? Today we're going to talk about how overreactions produce lasting liabilities. Okay, overreactions produce lasting liabilities. This is the last message in our series that we're calling How to Mess Up Your Life. We've been talking about how it is easy to mess up our life, okay, but it's hard to get it back together again. And then we're also discussing how to prevent messes before they happen, even kind of going down that path of talking about how to maybe undo some of the messes that have already taken place. And we're going through the book of Esther in the Bible, and the entire book is a very interesting story. So we're going to pick up in the story where we last left off. And for those who have been on this journey with us, you probably remember that one of the characters in the story, King Xerxes, he threw this 6-month party. And then after that, he had this drunken banquet for 7 days right after that 6-month party. And as part of the banquet, the king ordered for his queen to be brought out in front of everybody to show off in front of all the drunken men. Well, she refused to do that. And so the king got really, really angry, just super angry. And he had an overreaction. And this is where we pick up in our story. We're going to pick up in Esther chapter 1, starting in verse 13. So listen to this story as we're going through it. It says, the king, he immediately, after this happened, he consulted with his wise advisors who knew all the Persian laws and customs, for he always asked their advice. And it goes through the names of these men. I won't read them all. And it says they met with the king regularly, and they held the highest positions in the empire. We go to verse 15 now, part of the story. It says, and he said, what must be done to Queen Vashti after she, did all this? What penalty does the law provide for a queen who refuses to obey the king's orders properly sent through his eunuchs? And then one of his king's advisors, he answered, he said, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also every noble and citizen throughout your empire. Women everywhere will begin to despise their husbands and learn that Queen Vashti has refused to appear before the king. Before this day is out, the wives of all the king's nobles throughout Persia and Media will hear what the queen did and start treating their husbands the same way. There will be no end to their contempt and anger. So if it pleases the king, we suggest that you issue a written decree, a law of the Persians and Medes that cannot be revoked. It should order that Queen Vashti be forever banished from the presence of King Xerxes, and that the king should choose another queen more worthy than she. This is a crazy story, isn't it? When this decree is published throughout the king's vast empire, husbands everywhere, whatever their rank, will receive proper respect from their wives. The king and his nobles thought this made good sense, so he followed this particular counsel. Can you imagine if this were to happen today? Can you just imagine this? Okay. Then the last part of this, verse 22, he sent letters to all parts of the empire, to each province in its own script and language, proclaiming that every man should be the ruler of his own home and should say whatever he pleases. Okay? And then the last verse here, it says, the last part of this story, but after Xerxes' anger had subsided, he began thinking about Vashti and what she had done and the decree he had made. About time he started thinking about it. Now, this story, honestly, it's actually full of irony and humor in the way it's written, okay? It really is. And I'm sure you caught a lot of that, okay? Now, at the beginning of this story, the whole story of the book of Esther, as we just kind of go back, it appears like King Xerxes is the world's greatest king. Like he's the dude. Like he's the man, okay? Like he's so wealthy. He's so powerful, okay? He throws a 6-month party, holds nothing back, all right? Then this is the 6-month party followed by a lavish banquet with gold goblets and gold couches and silver couches and unlimited wine and unlimited food, okay? But then all of a sudden, there's an immediate turn of events. He's now struggling to maintain his dignity when his wife, the queen, defies his orders to show up at the banquet. So the king totally overreacts by gathering his most important advisors together in the land. Because why? Because the king seems clueless about his own personal life. So he gathers his advisors together, and then his supposedly wise advisors come up with a recommended national law because he's incompetent to navigate his own marriage. I mean, that's basically what's happening. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what's taking place. So they issue a decree that is supposed to prevent all women from disregarding their husbands like this. So the advisors, they totally overreact as well, okay? They turn the king's personal situation into a nationwide political crisis. This is now a nationwide political crisis because his wife didn't show up, right? And they want to prevent every woman in the land from imitating the queen's rebellion against the king. So their advice is to tell the entire empire what happened and to demand that wives respect their husbands. So the very thing they want to prevent other people knowing about the incident is the very thing they're broadcasting by telling everybody about the incident. Like, it's crazy. This whole thing is really absurd. And I'm thinking, some powerful king here, okay? This is like a total joke, except that it's not. So all these overreactions create a national crisis out of a personal or a private issue between the king and the queen. And then they broadcast the personal issue on a national scale, which will only make things worse than ever before. Overreaction on top of overreaction on top of overreaction. Can you see this? It's insane. Okay, overreactions. They produce lasting liabilities. So we're going to look at some observations about overreactions, and we'll look at overcoming overreactions, because really, these are things that we all navigate once we really stop and think about it. So, some observations about overreactions. The first one is this: overreactions cloud our judgment and decision making. They actually do. It clouds our judgment and decision making. As we see here, and we're reminded about the last part of this story we read today, it says, after King Xerxes' anger had subsided, he began thinking about the queen and what she had done and the decree he had made. You see, once he finally calmed down, he began thinking about his overreactions and how it changed his life forever. It clouded his judgment at the very beginning, and he made these decisions. Then he started thinking about it like, what in the world did I do? He started to see just how his overreactions destroyed his decision-making abilities. So now he's going to have to pay the price, all because of his overreactions that clouded his judgment and decision-making. You know, when we allow overreactions to take over, we lose sight of what's happening. We just can't see clearly. We begin to make poor decisions in life, and our judgment suffers. And as a result, those around us suffer as well. This can even happen in a professional setting. Personal setting, professional setting. I think back, it reminds me of what happened in the summer of 1986. There were two ships that collided in the Black Sea off the coast of Russia. And hundreds of passengers died because they ended up in the icy waters below. It was a super sad situation. Now, the cause of the accident, it wasn't like some technology problem or like a radar malfunction. It wasn't even like thick fog. But the cause was human reaction, or we could say human overreaction. Each captain had been aware of the other's ship nearby. They knew there was another ship nearby. Both could have steered clear of the other one, but according to the news report, neither captain wanted to give way to the other. Each one made an overreaction decision to be stubborn in the moment, and they lost sight of the bigger picture of safety and all the passengers that were on board, and as a result, hundreds of people died. An overreaction clouded their judgment. They forgot what was going on. It clouded their judgment and decision making. You see, this thing has darker effects than what we often realize on the surface. So in order to prevent overreactions, it's important that we do like a double check to our decisions or hold off on our decisions when we find ourselves in certain situations, because again, it clouds our judgment and decision making. Now, I want to just kind of point out some areas real quick. When we often get into these kinds of situations, our judgment and our decision making gets clouded, and it's really easy to make an overreaction or to have overreactions when we're in these kind of situations. One is when we get angry. Have you ever noticed that, okay? When we're angry, when we're offended, when we're upset, when we're highly disappointed, and we make decisions. We can go ahead and put that up there, anger. I think that's one of them. We have that, yeah. When we're angry, and we make decisions out of anger, it skews our thinking. It clouds what we're really doing. We say and we begin to do things that we wouldn't normally do. We've all been down this road, right? You know what I'm talking about, okay? We often overreact when we're angry, and we pay for it. Sometimes for many years to come. Good to recognize that. Another situation that we get in and it clouds our decision making and judgment is when we're exhausted. Boy, I know this is one that I found out from me. When I get exhausted, fatigue and exhaustion can cause us to easily overreact in unnecessary ways. We can do all kinds of things maybe we wouldn't normally do. Another one is when we're anxious or fearful. We're anxious or feel fearful. Okay, anxiety and fear can be so distressing that sometimes we make almost any decision just to get out of it. And it clouds our judgment and decision making. And that decision is often an overreaction. The decision may feel good in the moment because we're just trying to get out of that anxiety or that fear, but then we heavily regret it down the road. Okay, another situation we get in that clouds our judgment and decision making is when we're pressured. We're pressured. When we're pressured or we feel pressure, we often overreact. And then when we make decisions in that kind of pressurized environment, guess what? They're often not good decisions. It's often not good. At the end of the day, you know what? Pressure is often fear-based. Think about it. Whereas pressure, it's fear-based. We're fearing that we're going to miss out on something. Or we're fearing maybe we don't qualify, or it's going to pass us by, or something bad may happen. But pressure is almost always based or rooted in fear. And fear is almost never a good environment to make significant decisions because we get clouded and we can't see clearly. Making decisions out of pressure, it often causes an overreaction of some kind. And not a good one. Another situation we get in that clouds our decision-making and judgment. Excuse me. Yeah, Shell, go ahead and give me some water here. Thank you. Appreciate that. Is when we experience major loss. Major loss. You know, when this happens, it often reshapes our normal thinking process. It can cause us to make impulse decisions. And many of these impulse decisions fall into the category of overreactions one way or another. And so this is just not a good time to make significant decisions when we've experienced a major loss, because a lot of times we have this overreaction in some way, shape, or form. And then on the other end of the spectrum, also when we experience a victory. We don't often think about that. But when we experience a big, high, so to speak, in life, okay, not only when we experience a low, but when we experience an unusual high in life, a big win or a great success can cause us to have a sense of overconfidence. And the emotions will deceive us. And a lot of times we may have an overreaction when it comes to a decision making, and we just don't see things very clearly in these types of moments. And when we make decisions in these environments that we're talking about, it can often be an overreaction, and overreactions often produce lasting liabilities. This is good for us to see. Okay, now that's the first observation. The second observation is this. Second observation, overreactions have a ripple effect. Everybody say ripple effect. So many of you know, I think many of us know that this week there was a major earthquake off the coast of Russia. How many of you knew that? This was actually one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded. So it's a big deal. Big deal just off the coast of Russia. That's devastating in and of itself, of course. And at the same time, there was an earthquake off the coast of Russia. Me and Shelley, we were on vacation in Washington State. Okay, just for geography purposes, that's the West Coast. Okay. Of America, not the East Coast. Sometimes we get the Washingtons confused, right? So we're on the Washington State, West Coast. And we can put this picture up of us. This is a picture. We were on that was the day we were on the West Coast. There in Washington, we went to Olympic National Park. We did a lot of hiking, went to some beaches. That was a beach along the Pacific coast right there. And the day after we were right there on the Pacific coast, the earthquake happened near Russia, off the coast of Russia. And as a result, there were actually tsunami advisories right there where we were the day after we had been there. Tsunami advisories right there on the coast of Washington, just a day later. Now remember, the earthquake happened near Russia, okay? The ripple effects of the tsunami advisory were thousands of miles away. But still, there on the coast of Washington. Nothing damaging took place there, but there were ripple effects that were present, the ripple effects which produced this tsunami advisory right there all along the coast of Washington, where you see, right behind us. So what am I saying? The ripple effect continued far beyond the initial point of impact of the earthquake. That's the way tsunamis often work. Now, the ripple effect, it just keeps going and going and going. What is that, like 5,000 miles away from Russia or whatever? I don't know what it is, but it's a long distance, right? It's a long distance. The ripple effect just keeps going and going and going. This is a lot like overreactions. It's also what happened in our story when the king and his advisors overreacted. They created decisions that rippled and carried far beyond the original point of impact. It just rippled. It just kept going. It started with King Xerxes and the queen, a personal issue between them. Now, it could have just stayed there, but instead he overreacted, as we already talked about. Then his advisors got involved. They overreacted. Then a law or decree was created about this. Then the couriers got involved to deliver this law and this decree to the entire empire. And then the information was then communicated and rippled to every single person throughout the empire. Rippled. Boom, 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 boom. The overreactions created this ripple effect far beyond the point of impact. And then it came back around to the king. He realized that through his own decree to banish his wife from his presence forever, that his overreaction not only infected the entire empire, but it came back to haunt him as well. Have you ever made a decision out of an overreaction that you wished you could take back because of the ripple effect that it had? Anybody? Yeah. The ripple effect of overreactions. Maybe it was a harsh word that you said, and it just rippled. A harsh word that you spoke. Or maybe a past failure that you brought up with somebody in the heat of the moment, and it was an overreaction, and it rippled throughout that relationship, whatever kind of relationship that was, and it rippled in a way that you could have never imagined, in a way that you would have never wished would have happened. Maybe it was an impulsive text that you sent prematurely as an overreaction, and it's still causing a lot of problems. Maybe a social media comment that became a bigger issue than what you ever thought it would in the moment because it was an overreaction. And it rippled. Maybe something you said or did at work out of frustration as an overreaction in the moment, and it just rippled. And you're like, oh my goodness, I never thought it would end up here. And you see, once that ripple begins, it's very difficult to stop because it causes a number of issues. Like, we're going to just quickly mention some issues that it causes. It causes relational damage. That's one of them. It drives a wedge in relationships that can stay for a long time. And I've seen some of these things stay for a lifetime. It stays there, it drives a wedge in relationships. And it truly impacts many people around us, our friends, our family, our coworkers. It's a real deal. Another issue that causes is reputational damage. Reputational damage. It can negatively impact our influence. Okay? It can even misrepresent our true values because of an overreaction that we have in a moment. It can take years to build a strong reputation. How many of you know that? But only one moment of an overreaction to destroy it. Yeah. It's true. Like, it's a big deal. Another issue that it creates is spiritual distance. An overreaction can put up a barrier between us and God. Now, God never leaves us. The Bible says He doesn't leave us. And at the same time, it's possible for us to put up barriers in our relationship with Him through overreactions that have a ripple effect between Him and us. So it's possible to create some spiritual distance at times with an overreaction. Another outcome of this is personal regret. We often don't think of the impact that our overreaction creates and that we'll have to live with. Like, we got to live with this. But those are regrets that we can carry long after the incident, just like King Xerxes. He wasn't thinking, well, man, what is going to happen to me? Am I going to have a personal regret after I make this decision to banish the queen and send this all throughout the empire? And then he's like, oh my goodness. It seems like after a while he began to realize, what have I done? This ripple effect, it just created this massive personal issue for me. This is what it can do for us. You see, overreactions often produce lasting liabilities. And then the third observation is this. Third observation, overreactions reveal gaps in our lives. Everybody say gaps. Gaps. Gaps in our lives. So many years ago, when we lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and our three sons were just little kids. At that time in our life, we had a minivan. Anybody in the minivan stage of life? Like a minivan stage of life. So we were in a minivan stage of life. We had a minivan. And I remember we packed up our minivan. And really early, one summer morning, we took a road trip, vacation to Myrtle Beach. Because we were on the East Coast. It was still a long drive, but not nearly as far as it is from Iowa here, but we got our family together, put everything in our minivan, started off to Myrtle Beach, and we were just at the beginning. It was very early in the morning, it was still dark, and we were heading into the city of Pittsburgh on our trip on like a 4 or 5 lane interstate just before sunrise, when it sounded like we hit a large metal object in the road. Okay? Now, Shelley was driving, and I had been looking down at something in the car, maybe reading something at the moment of impact, and so I didn't see what happened, but I heard it, and everybody in the van heard it. Our kids were probably kind of dozing off because it was early in the morning, but everybody was just like, oh, because like you couldn't help but hear it. It was so loud. It was so loud, so drastic, it startled all of us. And with some intensity in my voice, I quickly said, Shelley, what did you hit? Okay, and she said, I don't know. I didn't see anything. And so we pulled over to the side of the road. Again, it was still dark, so it was kind of hard to see. But whatever was hit, it was so bad that when we pulled over to the side of the road, she could not get out of the driver's side door. She couldn't get out. Like, the doors wouldn't open. So we both crawled out, both got out of the passenger side. And we looked, and almost the entire front of the minivan was bashed and shattered. Glass broken, headlights and just damage to the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, we looked down the side of the minivan, down the driver's side. There were dents and lots of damage down the entire side of the minivan. And we couldn't open any of the doors on that side. It was crazy. It was crazy. And at that point, my intensity and my volume began to elevate a little bit. All right? And now I would say that I'm definitely in the territory of an overreaction. All right? So I said, Shelly, look at this. You said you didn't see anything in the road? Like, it sounded like you hit a refrigerator. Like, how can you hit a refrigerator in the middle of the interstate and not see it? I said, this is evidence and this is proof. And Shelly looked at me and she goes, honestly, I didn't see anything. And I continued with my overreaction. And I said, how do you not see a refrigerator sitting in the middle of the interstate when you're driving? I said, what are you doing? And I said, I knew I should have been driving. I told you I continued with the overreaction. Yeah. See, you're a little smarter than I was in that moment because you're getting this. At this point, Shelly started to cry. Okay? You can already see the problems associated with my overreaction, right? So what's happening here? Well, I'm declaring that she hit a refrigerator in the middle of an interstate, but nobody saw a refrigerator. I'm just saying you hit a refrigerator. I don't know why I said a refrigerator. It just came out of my mouth. And then I'm placing blame on her, right? And we don't even know what took place, but I'm placing the blame on her. And then I'm basically telling her that I'm a better driver than she is. Because we all know, no, we'll just stop there. But you get the point, okay? And then my overreaction, if possible, got even worse. Yes. I said, Shelly, you ruined our vacation. I know this is terrible. You're going to hate me after today. Nobody's going to like me. It's okay, whatever. Shelly, you've ruined our vacation. And then she really started crying. It was not one of my finest moments in life. Not a good moment, okay? Long story short, we drove back to where the incident occurred, and we saw a freshly obliterated deer carcass lying by the side of the road. Almost unrecognizable. I mean, obliterated, and I won't go into any more detail, but it was obliterated, okay? And then when it turned daylight, we could see deer fur stuck to the front of our minivan for further proof and validation that we hit a refrigerator. It turned out that the deer actually ran into our van. It was not Shelly's fault, and it was not a refrigerator, okay? Couldn't see the deer because it was dark, and there was a, what do you call those in the road? It's like an HOV line that had whatever, something there, and it jumped over that, and nobody could see it because of that. And it was the driver's blind side with their visibility and all that kind of stuff. So I realized then what had happened, and I did a lot of apologizing over my overreaction, okay? And it's still a moment that we'll never forget today. Now, we did go on vacation, because you're wondering, did we go on vacation? We did go on vacation. It was just delayed by like half a day or a day because we had to go back and rent a vehicle. But we got on our vacation to Myrtle Beach. Now, in all seriousness, that overreaction revealed some gaps in my life, okay? Because that was a big-time overreaction on my part. Now, I needed to do some soul searching. Like, what's going on here? Okay, why did I overreact like that? Okay, what were the gaps that I needed to address in my own life? Because this was more, it really said more about me in that moment than anybody else. You know, when we overreact, these are good questions to ask ourselves. In the story we're looking at today, there were a number of things that the overreaction of the king, it revealed about him. It revealed insecurity. Although the king had enormous wealth and power, he was insecure at his core. A lot of insecurity. When there was an issue in his own household, his overreaction revealed that he was insecure about how he thought it would impact his throne and what that would mean and what that would do. You know, anytime we resort to using laws in place of good leadership, that's a sign there's a problem. King Xerxes should have just addressed his relational situation with the queen by being a good leader. Instead, he stooped to create this law instead. It's a good indication there's a major gap somewhere in our life. For him, it was insecurity. What is it for us? when we resort to using demand instead of dignity, again, a sign that there's an underlying problem. This was the basis for his overreaction with the queen. He demanded her instead of treating her with dignity. Good indication there's a major gap somewhere in our life. Another gap that it revealed for him was fear. So fear. Have you ever cornered an animal? You corner an animal and the animal feels threatened, and then it feels like that there's no way out. Okay, many times that animal will turn into something completely different than we've ever seen before, okay? That nice little kitty may turn into a tiger, right? Or that sweet little dog may turn into a ferocious beast. Why? Because they're reacting out of fear. Well, this is what King Xerxes was doing. He was fearful that he may lose influence. Okay, he was fearful that he may lose control, which he kind of already had. He was fearful that he may lose respect. He was fearful that he may lose his resources and his wealth. So he overreacted out of those fears. It was a sign there's gaps in his life that need to be addressed. Another gap that it showed for him is selfishness. This entire story that we looked at today was a selfish move by a selfish king who was only thinking about himself. His overreactions were selfishly motivated and didn't really have anybody else in mind, just him. He was so concerned about himself and no one else. A huge gap in his life. It was revealing a huge gap that needed to be addressed. So let's put some questions on the screen here. I think it's good for us to ask these questions. Okay, what do my overreactions reveal? When we find ourselves overreacting, what is it revealing about me? What kind of gaps? Like where are the gaps in my life that are the underlying cause of my overreactions? And then what might I be trying to cover up that my overreactions are uncovering? They're uncovering something. What is this that's going on in my life? Why? Because overreactions produce lasting liabilities. And then finally, last thing we're looking at here is overcoming overreactions. How do we overcome overreactions? You know, one of the focuses of this series is about preventing the mess before it happens. So let's talk about this before we go. Let's look at how to break the destructive pattern of overreactions. Here's several ways we can do that. One is to identify the triggers. We identify the triggers. You know, we all have certain things that tend to trigger us more than others. It's good to identify what those are for you in your life. King Xerxes, he was triggered by public disrespect. Okay? That was one of the things that triggered him. But take some time to write down the triggers that can fuel the overreactions in our life, in your life. It may be for us, is it feeling disrespected? Or is it being criticized? When we get criticized, what triggers us? All of a sudden we're triggered by criticism. Or maybe it's when we're ignored. That triggers something. Or maybe when we feel like we're taken advantage of. Or maybe when somebody challenges us in a certain way, it just triggers us, just boom, we just begin to almost pop off, you know? Or when certain topics are discussed, we just get triggered by these things. It's good for us to know what those things are, because being aware is the first step towards overcoming overreactions in our life. Another one is this. Another way we overcome overreactions is we ask for Holy Spirit guidance. So we ask for Holy Spirit guidance. This is actually one of my favorite things to do in order to overcome overreactions. I'm definitely not perfect. I mess up all the time. But I love getting guidance from the Holy Spirit in moments of possible overreaction. I'll often try to reach out to the Holy Spirit and speak to Him silently in tense situations that I face in life. I'll pray under my breath, or I'll pray in my heart, Holy Spirit, what's the response you're looking for in this situation so that I don't have an overreaction? What do you want me to say or do here so that I don't overreact? Because I know my tendency could be to overreact. But Holy Spirit, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? I remember a few years ago, me and Pastor Jeff were in an unexpected, tense and very difficult situation together, not against each other. We were having a conversation with some other people, and it did not involve anybody that attended this church. It was an outside situation. We were together, and I knew that our response, could tip things in one direction or the other. It was a very volatile kind of a situation, so I just left the room and let him deal with it. No, I didn't do that, but I thought about it. But truly, I didn't know what to do in that situation that we were in together. And I could tell that almost everything that we were saying was being twisted and used against us. And I knew if I overreacted, that the things would turn very quickly in a very negative direction. So I actually began to pray under my breath. Holy Spirit, show me what to do. What am I supposed to say so that I don't overreact here? And at that moment, I saw this picture of Jesus just kind of flash before my eyes, like internally, like in my mind. And it was a situation where Jesus was being falsely accused, and I felt like that was a situation that we were in at that time. And I remembered that Jesus actually said nothing in that particular situation. He said nothing. And I was asking the Holy Spirit, what do I say? And I realized that the Holy Spirit was telling me to say nothing. Because anything that I say might be an overreaction, and it might be the wrong thing. He was telling me, say nothing. And that's exactly what I did. I said nothing. And we made it out of there alive. Right? I said nothing. You know, the Holy Spirit always knows best. His guidance is much better than our overreactions. Another thing we can do to overcome overreactions is we practice the principle of pause. Pause. Everybody say pause. Pause. Powerful principle. You know, I'm reminded in James chapter 1:19, it says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. You know, this really has within it this principle of pause. We're just kind of formulating it into some words here. And if we practice this principle, it will help to defeat the overreactions in our life. When we start to sense or experience strong emotions when we're in a situation, instead of responding or instead of reacting, let's pause. Can we all say it again? Say pause. Pause. A very powerful thing. What can we do? Take several deep breaths. Tell yourself, or actually say out loud, I need some time to think about this before I respond. That's a statement of pause. It's a good thing to do. Walk away for a few moments. Process. Spend some time in prayer, at least under your breath in the moment like I was doing at that time, right? Or away from the situation. Spend some time away from the situation. Distance yourself from it. It's a good thing to do. Sleep on it. A lot of times we sleep on it. Wait 24 hours. It's amazing what happens in a 24-hour period of time when you could be overreacting. You're like, I'm going to pause. I'm going to wait 24 hours before I say something about this situation where I really want to, strangle somebody. I feel like doing that, but I'm going to wait before I say anything. I'm going to wait before I send that text. I'm going to wait 24 hours before I send that email. I'm going to wait 24 hours before I post anything on social media. Anybody with me here today? I'm going to wait. I'm going to pause and not overreact. Pausing will automatically lead to a better outcome versus overreacting. Man, that could have just been, that might have been one gold nugget you can take away from this. If so, that was just worth it all right there. Just pause. Another thing we can do is consider the long-term impact. Before overreacting or responding, ask these questions. I'm not putting these questions, I'm not going to put them on the screen, but I'm going to kind of just throw them out there to you. Ask these questions to yourself. How might this response, if I overreact, how is it going to affect my relationships 1 year from now? What kind of long-term effect is this going to have? Is it really worth that? If I overreact, is this reaction, is it aligned with my faith? Is it really aligned with my faith? Is this reaction, is this response I'm thinking about, is it pleasing to God? Is he pleased by this? And then here's a good one. Would I advise others to respond in this way or to react in this way? Would I advise other people to do what I'm about to do right now? And then how might this affect the people around me if I overreact in this way? Hey, it's good. Consider the long-term impact. Consider the long-term impact. I'm talking to myself too. This is what I got to do, right? I got to do this. I got to do these things. These questions help us to think about the ripple effect that we talked about earlier instead of just the immediate effect that our overreaction could have. It can save us years of heartache and pain down the road. And then finally, we can create solutions. Solutions. Something we don't often consider in moments of possible overreaction are solutions. Wow. We can be solution-oriented instead of reaction-oriented, instead of issues-oriented. And we can ask ourselves some questions to kind of help flip the script in this area. What response would help to solve the problem instead of enhancing the problem or instead of creating new problems? What kind of response could I give that would help to solve things? Or how can I respond in a way that will help everybody to win? What if we all had a win? How can we all win in this situation? You see, followers of Jesus are solution-oriented people. Let's represent that. Let's be that. This actually helps us to be a light in a potentially dark situation, a dark environment. It's a powerful response that can transform people and situations. And what I'm going to have us do right now as we're wrapping up the message, I'm going to have us stand in a couple of seconds. And I just want to say, before we stand and respond to the message, I'm going to ask that nobody leave, that nobody move around, because this is the most important part of our service, because I'm going to ask you the most important question I could ever ask you. So as we're about to stand here, I'm going to ask that nobody move around, and we could just be respectful of this moment and what God's about to do. So can we stand to our feet here real quick?